We're going to pick it up again on chapter 3. Now, am I right in assuming everyone now, if I say get into your virtual desktop and get into Android Studio, we can all do that? Is that correct? Then get into the virtual desktop and get into Android Studio. And I will do the same. And John has been continuously updating the list of people as far as the number that you have for your Mac. You will have the same number for the Android tablet as well. And if you're not sure what those numbers are, I believe if you open up the cabinet, it is in there. There is a list. Please don't take the list, but there is a list in there that's got your name and the number you're supposed to use. Should remember to do this before we start.
Can we open up the Android sample we had
You can, but you don't have to. Again, I'm going to run through it again because for the people who weren't able to get on last time, I want to make sure that they're caught up because one or two of the people who weren't able to get in weren't in the class last semester, so they haven't seen this stuff before. Well, I'll tell you what, while that's spinning a little bit, let's go and actually start on chapter 3. So we had this before. Again, this is more for those of you who were not able to get in last time. Just to make sure you see this, when you start up Android Studio, this should be your welcome screen right here. All right? And as far as I know, you're always going to be choosing either start a new Android project or open an existing Android project. All right, I don't think you're going to touch any of the rest of the things that are in there. I never have. All right, when it comes up, again, the screen that you see right here is similar to the opening screen that we see when we bring up Eclipse. Again, not identical, but it's pretty much the same. And I want people to realize, even if you did this yesterday, just so you know, this thing right here where it says application name, just like with iOS, if you were to actually go out and create an app, that's the name that app will have. All right? The domain name, rather, we talked about before. You can put virtually anything you want there. The location, everybody's cool now with the location, correct? You've all got an Android folder on your H drive, like I asked you to do. I'd strongly suggest, again, that you do that just so you don't run out of room on your virtual desktop. All right. So what we did was we changed it here from My Application to Android Sample. And again, you can put anything you want here, and we were sure that the project location was set to our H drive. All right. Once that came up, it was going to come up and ask us what version on the next screen. I guess it doesn't show it here, but what version of Android Studio we want to use. There is a button there under the minimum one, there's a hyperlink, I should say, that says something like show me more information. That shows you this. So what that does is it goes out to the developer.android.com site and it sees the percentage of people using all of the different flavors of the Android operating system. All right, next we come in and we create our activity. And again, for the majority of the stuff that we do, at least at the beginning of the class, we're going to just be choosing blank activity, which should be the one that's chosen by default. You can change your names to what they tell you to change them here, so it looks like this: Android sample activity and activity Android sample, or you can just leave the defaults. It really doesn't matter. All right? All right, so that got us up to here. So again, my hope is everybody was able to get to that point where you were able to at least go through the steps of creating a new Android application. I should mention to you also, and again, I know some of you know this already, but I should mention this to you, that you have to learn how to spell, though. There you go. If you go out to the website, developer.android.com. That is the site where everything Android basically is. All right? So I don't know if you bookmark stuff like that, but just remember it otherwise. But what you're going to find is quite often when you go out and you want to get information on something and you Google it, quite often, either it's going to be stackoverflow.com that you're going to find, or it's going to be developer.android.com. All right, just so you know, too, some people know this, some don't, because I've heard this before. Well, why don't we just use android.com? All right, somebody actually bought that domain name evidently before Android got it. All right, and it is a site, but I don't know. I've heard that it is connected, and I've heard it's not connected to Android itself, so I don't know. All right, it looks a lot different than the last time I saw it, because it's got, last time I saw it, it looked really bad. It looked like somebody just kind of threw some junk up there. All right. That's possible. But people do that, they squat and they buy different things, so. All right, so what we were supposed to do to modify this sample application is you were supposed to come up in here, in the area in here, and where that said text view, and it said hello world, put your mouse on there, single click on it, then hit the delete key, which will remove it. All right, you don't want to remove where it says relative layout because that's the layout on your screen, but down below it. If you don't want to do that, you can also click right in here. You can click actually on the word hello world. And either of those should work. All right? I said this last time, but now that you've hopefully got it up on your screen, if you could all just look up here for a second. And like I said, I know a lot of you know this already, but let's assume for a second I wanted to grab a button right here and put it on the screen. There's two ways that I can do it. I can take the button, literally click on it, hold down and drag it right out there on the screen and drop it. That's fine. Or I can take it and drag and literally put it on top of where it says relative layout. There is no advantage or disadvantage to using either one of those. All right? We may end up, again, finishing a little early today, and if we do, I would strongly suggest that you go back and look at everything, because we're going to go through about the first 9 or 10 chapters. All right? But go back and see if there's anything in there that you have a problem with. All right? What we're going to do next Tuesday, this is an FYI for you, okay? What we're going to do Tuesday next week is we're going to build an app as a class. And we're going to make it really simple. And then I'm going to say, okay, now that we've done this, I want you to copy this, copy all your code or copy your folder or whatever to another folder, and I'm going to want you to make changes to it. So you'll have the original and then the changed one. Does that make sense? All right. So we're going to do that as a class, and that may take most of the period on Tuesday. Then Thursday will be a lab. All right. And we'll see how people are doing at that time. Hopefully you won't need more than a day of lab. The program we're going to do is not very hard. Okay. All right. Again, this is more so for those of you who were not in the class last semester, but I do want to make sure that you see this, hear about this, whatever. I'll bring up, not that one. Close. Come on. Boy, that's really operating fast, isn't it? It doesn't even recognize my mouse click. There we go. All right, I'll open up this Android sample one. In fact, this one, I think for some reason, I'm just going to go back. I'm going to open up the original one that I did because I had absolutely no problems working with that one. All right, so I'm going to open up Android sample project, the same one that you created. All right. Again, if you look up on the screen here, you're going to see that under resources, you've got a bunch of stuff. This is not like when we created a Java project in Eclipse. When we created a Java project in Eclipse, we would have a bunch of jar files that we looked at like the first day and we never looked at again. All right, and we would have where we would go in there, we would create our package, and then we create our class. We wouldn't have much more in there. In here, there's a lot of different stuff. I guess it's hiding. All right. But when you look at the stuff that's here, notice there's a drawable, which we're not going to use yet. There's a layout folder, and that's got this XML file in it. That's what that is. There's a menu file. All right. And there's a MIP map file. That's got a lot of your stuff in there for your images. All right. And then finally, there's a values folder in there. And that values folder has a few files in it. Now, you might look at this and you might say, well, I know what they are. We've already talked. No, we haven't. We've talked about the strings file already. In that file, in the strings.xml file, that's where you put all of your strings. Now, technically, if you look up on the screen here, I can remove this line now because I don't have that hello world in here anymore. So even though it removed it physically from the device, it doesn't remove it from the associated text file. It wouldn't hurt to leave it in, but after a while, you get a lot of code in there, and whether it's XML or Java code, if you don't need it anymore, you should get rid of it. I'm doing this website that I was telling you about before, and I just wanted to show you this because if you don't, you get stuff that looks like this. I started putting images in here, and I guess, not there. I guess that after a while, I started, for lack of better words, going image crazy, and I just got a ton of images, and I've got to go clean that thing out eventually and figure out what I need and what I don't need. The time to do it is when it's up on the screen, all right, and it's fresh in your mind. Well, I'll go back and do it later. You probably won't, so if you're like me, you probably won't. And then you can say, no, Jeff, nobody's like you. My wife told me that at lunch. She said, nobody's like you. All right, so that's the strings file. There's also a file in there that we probably never looked at before. It's called dimens.xml. And that's got your dimensions. You can literally set stuff up in there for your different widgets, for your screen, etc. You can do, it's a thing for dimensions. So you're going to set stuff up. And remember, again, some of you heard this and some of you have not. We don't use pixels in here or points or anything like that. What we use are DPs, which stands for density pixels, and SP, which I think are scalable pixels or something like that. The SP is what you use, that's what you use for your text. So if I want something to be the equivalent of about 20 points, I'll put 20 SP in there. All right? The DP is for everything that's not text. Okay? So those are what we're going to end up using. Finally, there's a styles in here. And not exactly, but notice it says in there name equal app theme. You may or may not remember that from last semester in the ASP.NET class. We took a little bit of a look at using themes in there. It's very similar in here. All right. Now, if you notice, it says parent equal theme.appcompat.light.dark action bar, and that's because that's the default color. There are a couple more colors if you want to that you can change this to. One of them is almost totally black. It's very hard to see. All right, you say, well, this one says dark. No, this one is dark basically all over. All right, but there's like 3 of them I think you get by default, but you can actually go out and buy themes. You can go out and create your own theme. All right, so if you were creating an app and you wanted to have its own special color scheme or whatever, you can do that. All right, and we'll get into some of that stuff as we go on. All right, I believe I mentioned last time, but in case I didn't, this file that's right here, where it says, or this folder where it says Gradle scripts, you should never have to touch that. That's basically all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes whenever you're compiling your program. All right? And I don't even want to open up the stuff. I don't know what's in there. All right? But I've done that before when I've opened up other packages and other software and other files that I shouldn't have. And oh, that looks cool. And I open it up and all of a sudden my program doesn't work anymore. That wouldn't be a real big travesty or a real big problem here because our program doesn't have much in it. Okay? All right, so we'll look at a lot of this stuff in more detail as we go on. We'll be adding more stuff in here, etc., as we do go on. And the stuff I just mentioned to you is going to be explained in more depth and breadth of coverage in a couple more in a couple more chapters. So you're going to see it again. All right. The other thing that we talked about, and John, you're going to have to help walk me through this. If you decide, I would recommend that everybody in here, this again especially is for the people who weren't in here last semester, but that everybody in here create what's called an emulator. And what an emulator is it'll actually run it on screen and tell you what it looks like. In fact, it'll look like that. All right? And the first time you bring it up, it might take a little bit of time. All right, it might take 5 or 10 minutes before it comes up. After that, it should only take a couple minutes. I will tell you, what I typically do, I've started to develop the philosophy, I think that's what you told me, John, that usually Mondays you restart your virtual desktop. I'm leaving this sucker on all week. Because then I don't have to worry about it being on. So even if I come in and close this down, that's going to stay open. When you close down your desktop by disconnecting like that, anything that you have open will still be open the next time you come up. All right. So I'm probably just going to leave mine up. Then I don't have to worry about it. All right. Do you have to do that? No. Do you want to do that? That's your call. All right. But what I was saying was when we come in here, you'll want to create an emulator. And to do that, you'll go over to Tools. And under Tools, you'll go to Android. And under Android, you'll go to AVD Manager. I'm leaving it up on the screen there so you can see it. That's right so far, correct? I don't have to change anything? Okay. Now, when I tried to do this during the break, John was in here one day and so was I. And he'd already done it successfully, which usually means that I couldn't do it successfully. And I wasn't disappointed. But for some reason, there were pathing issues and a lot of other things where I was trying to create this, it kept saying there wasn't enough room. It let me create it just fine. But when I tried to open it up to use it, it said you don't have enough room to do that, all right, on your system. But if you go again to Tools, Android, and you go down to AVD Manager, it's going to come up, and it looks like this. You can see I already have one here. So yours won't look the same. I'm just going to leave the one I have here. But let's say that I wanted to have a new one, all right? What's that? Yeah, down at the bottom. Create virtual device. So if you don't have anything at all on yours, click Create Virtual Device. All right. Now what you'll notice is if I click phone or TV and phone and Wear and tablet, I get different types of things. This is different than the way it was set up under Eclipse last year because everything was just together and it was by brand name, I believe. All right. What I would recommend you choose, though, is just tablet. All right. I've chosen I think I've got the Nexus 10. You could probably choose any of these. It really, I don't think it should matter, should it?
You have to use tablets. They tend to take up a little more space. Might not start
Okay.
as fast.
All right. Should we use phone then? All right. So John recommends use phone and not use tablet. Okay. And notice, that's the one I guess I've got, is I've got a Nexus 1 already. And it even shows you pretty much what it's supposed to be. Since I have a Nexus 1, I'll create another one that's a Nexus S. Okay? So what do I have to do next? Well, I've highlighted it, so I click Next. And now it's asking me, it says, hey, you got all this stuff here. Is this the way you want everything set up? Now, I didn't change anything when I did mine. Do I have to make any changes on here?
No, you just don't want to use anything that says x86 on it. Make sure you always use the ARM.
All right, so to repeat what he said, in here, we don't want to choose any of these that say x86. So I want to choose that one. All right? And I think that's all we have to do. It's funny because I changed it and notice what it changed down to here. Consider using an x86 for better, fine. But the way that this is set up, it's not actually set up thinking, well, who's ever running this is on a virtual desktop. All right? So I'm going to click Next again. Now, in the past, when we were doing this same thing last semester in Eclipse, we had to fill out a bunch of stuff in here. Now you really don't have to fill out anything. We should be able to accept all of the default values right here, correct?
I would uncheck use host GPU.
Okay. All right.
Virtualized on the virtual desktop.
Okay, so the use host GPU will uncheck. All right. So this was checked. We unchecked it. All right. There are advanced settings, but it still does not look, I can click that, but it still doesn't look the way that it looked when we did it last semester. All right. It's set up a little bit different. The same stuff is happening, but it, oops, I guess, one arm. Next. All right. And it doesn't seem to matter if you put spaces in here for the name. All right. And so I just use the default, which is Nexus S API 23. Then I know what it is by taking a look at it. And I click Finish. And you'll notice in just a second, I'm going to have another one underneath the one that I already had. Okay? Now, if you look over on the side here, there's 3 buttons right here, or 3 icons. Let's go from right to left. The one on the end, if I click that one, notice what I can do. If I decided I wanted to create, basically duplicate this emulator, maybe just change 1 or 2 things, I could choose duplicate right there. The rest of the stuff, other than delete, you should never have to check with. You should never have to even use that one. All right? This one, so if I go back and I click the one I just created and I click the pencil, that brings me back into edit mode. So I can go back if I decided I didn't like the name or something like that. So I could go back and change that if I wanted to. All right? And the one that's right here, the one with the green arrow, that starts up the emulator. So people, start your emulators. Let's make sure that they all work, sir.
I got no room on my D drive. This is a mess. This is a mess. I know I got a new one today. I just fired it up.
Oh, you know what it is? You want to be pathing that back to the C drive.
Yeah.
John's going to have to, doesn't he want to path his new virtual desktop? Didn't we path the stuff to the C drive?
Yeah.
His isn't pathed
Oh.
because he's got a new virtual desktop. It's already telling him he's out of room.
I'll print the, where's that?
Yeah, you're smart enough, Luke. He'll print you out the list. You can walk through it. It'll take, what does it take, about 10 minutes maybe for him to do that?
It shouldn't be a problem, except all my files are hidden now.
Yep. So, for what we've done, anybody have any problems, any questions on any of that? Yes, sir.
Got a few errors after I built the Android sample project, and it's something to do with the app hat again. Like it's saying it's an app.
When we were first going through the stuff, did you set your minimum SDK to API 60?
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah. Jelly bean. Yeah, I did. I'm pretty sure.
Because whenever I've gotten that error, that's been the reason that I've gotten the error.
And also, like the result R under the R.net.
If you decide, after the break today, we're going to be passing out the tablets for you to hook up. We'll make sure the drivers are all set up and everything. If you say to yourself, you know what, I like using the regular Android device, then you never have to fire this sucker up. That makes sense? All right, and it's your call. To me, it depends on the sophistication of the program that I'm doing. On this first one, which literally said, welcome to the Android environment, I don't think it pays to hook up a device so you can see that. But if I'm creating a game, games run really badly on this emulator. All right. So remember, what we did in here before was we removed that thing that said, hello world. We removed it, and then we went in and we brought in a large, what was it? A large text object, dropped it right in the middle, and changed the text on it from large text to welcome to Android Studio. All right? Now, I remember doing this the other day, and when I did it, just like they showed in the book, I got the light bulb. And I said, any of you who didn't get the light bulb? And a lot of hands went up. I've done it 2 or 3 times, and sometimes it shows me the light bulb, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, when I clicked on it again, it showed.
Yeah, that's what I've had to do a couple times is click off of it and click on it and do a bunch of, and I can't tell you why that's the case. Again, I don't know if there's a little bit of a lag because we're running this off of a virtual desktop or not. I really don't know. But it's just something we're going to have to be able to work our way through. All right, so we changed this. So up here, all we have on the screen is welcome to Android Studio right here. If we do all that, this is what should come up. All right, if we double click on that, we changed it again to welcome to Android Studio. But after we hit enter, after we do that, this is what should come up on your screen. This is letting you know that it's an internal warning. It's not an error. It is not an error for you to go and hard code your strings in to your entire app. But it's considered poor programming practice to do so. All right? So if you want that warning to go away, again, hopefully the light bulb comes up and you click on that, and it's going to show you when you do that, it's going to say, well, there's a couple ways that I can fix this. So you click on the light bulb right there, and again, if it doesn't show, you might have to click off of it and click onto it again. But when you click this, notice what shows right here in the box now that I put the blue around. All right? So it says, do you want to disable inspection? That means basically if there's any kind of error, turn it off. You really shouldn't do that. All right? Because, all that stuff that they put in there, it's being put in there for you. Okay? You can edit that. You can suppress it, which basically says to just ignore it and just leave it the way it is. But here we want to extract string resource. That's the one we want to do. And again, if we do that, that should open up that very same strings.xml file that we looked at before. That should open this one up. When I did that, when it opened up that file for me, and it doesn't look like this, that's the end product. But when it opened it up for me and I followed the steps, and like it said, I went in there and typed in welcome string, what it did was it went and it changed it to this. So this is, you can look at it this way. Now that's a variable. Does that make sense to everybody? It's a variable. Its name is welcome string, and its value is welcome to the Android or to Android Studio. Technically, I guess you could say it's not even a variable. It's more an attribute. So that's the attribute and the attribute setting. All right. Then we went into the actual XML file. So we went into this file right here. That file. And we went in there and literally just added a line of code right there. And you can put in that, they tell you to put in 2 different colors. The first one is a variation of red. The second one is a variation of green. All right. So you see the swatch over here, and you'll see it on the actual screen itself. So when you look at it in design mode, mine still is John did this started to initialize the rendering there. So again, when I put that here, you can see that it turned green. All right. And later it's first red, and then they have you make it green. Again, whatever color you use, it's up to you. They just wanted to get you going on both the XML, all right, and doing it, in multiple ways. So that's what they have you do. It's shown right here. So that's what we did. All right. Again, that was a derivation of red. Then they changed it to so it was a derivation of green. That's what I have now. All right. You may or may not have done this before. You may or may not want to do this. But if you'd all look up on the screen right now, this is section 3.6. It says, so far in this chapter, the layout has only been previewed on the Nexus 4 or whatever we used. It says the layout can be tested for other devices by making selections from the device menu. All right. The other thing it says you can do, it says another thing that's on the top edge of the designer panel, and I don't remember where it is, but we can find it in a second. It actually looks like this. It shows you how it's going to look in a lot of different size devices. All right. There it is. See where mine right here says Nexus 4? Everybody see that? If I click the down arrow and I go down to preview all screen sizes, it's going to load all of them in there for me. Okay? So I can see what it would look like on various screen sizes. And if I want it back again, I just click on it and choose whatever one my Nexus 1 or whatever. And they should go away. All right, make me a liar. Whatever it was. I guess it was a Nexus 4. Is that what it was? Well, I know. Maybe you have to click, remove previews. There you go. Sorry. All right. Now, hopefully there was nothing in there that was too confusing or whatever to anybody. Now, the next chapter is a tour of the Studio user interface. The only thing I want to say about this, if you remember, the other day, guess it was Tuesday, I went out here and I showed you this out on the P drive for the class. You don't have to go out there. But what I showed you is under here, all right, this Android Studio tutorial for beginners. This runs through the same stuff. So if you go through these next few chapters and you think, boy, it didn't seem like they went over everything or it wasn't real thorough, then go back and look at this. This is like 30 or 40 pages. All right. Do you have to do that? No, not at all. But I'm just telling you. There actually should be two of them. I see the Android Studio tutorial, but there's another one. I just don't remember where it is. It's probably under the in-class. No, that's not it. Okay. I'll try to find it, but I know I've got it in here someplace. All right. So, welcome screen. I'm not going to say another word about it. We've already talked about it. There's nothing new there. Main window. Notice what they do. The author does a nice job. I actually did, believe it or not, on my way to St. Louis one weekend, went through every page of this book, looked at all the figures, looked at the ran through quickly every chapter before I decided that we'd use this book. And I did it with the other one too. And one of the things I like that it does, this might be something you look at once and never care about again, but at least you know where the stuff is. You can see, of course, you got your standard menu bar on top. Underneath the menu bar is the toolbar. Underneath the toolbar is the navigation bar over here. Underneath this is your work area in D. In E down here, that's your console area. And in F, that's your navigator, explorer window, whatever you want to call it. All right? You get a lot more comfortable working with this stuff once you work with it. And you're probably to the point after a while, you don't even know what the stuff is called. You just know where it is and you use it. It's not like it's a big thing one way or the other. Now, they mentioned that Android Studio also has a bunch of other windows that you can open. All right? It says, when enabled, are displayed along the bottom and the sides of the main window. What does that mean? Well, when you look over here, do you see these things? See how it says project and structure and captures and all that other stuff? There's some stuff down here. They're not wasting a lot of screen space. There's a lot of different things that you can open from in here. And many of them are explained in this chapter and in the upcoming chapters. All right? You might get a message like this when you first get onto the system. Mine comes up like that sometime and says no files are open. All right? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure why that's the case. So they start to go over some of these. So notice project, structure, and favorites. All right. So if we go back and look under here, there's project, there's structure, and there's favorites over there. All right, so as I go through these things, you can look on your own screen because it's much easier if I'm just working with the text here. As it says, the project view provides an overview of the file structure. Generally, if you double click on it, it will cause that file to be loaded into the appropriate editing tool. Structure provides a high-level view of the structure. Favorites, you can set up your own favorites in here. You can literally set up a favorites list. All right, so it says, as an example, a method in a source file can be added as a favorite by right-clicking on it and then choosing the structure tool window. Why would you want to do that? What if I, quite often, I wrote some kind of a method that I thought was really cool for a project, and I can use that for another project. I could make it a favorite and then open it up in my favorites window and just copy the code in. All right, as an example. Build variants, you're probably never going to have to jack with this. All right. To do, as it says, as the name implies, what happens is when you bring up certain things on screen, you'll get a comment under there that'll say to do, which is trying to let you know that, hey, probably you're not done with this section. So if you click the to do button, I think it shows you all the different to dos that you have. And notice there's another way that you can get to it. You can go to Files, Settings, and navigate to the to do page. So there's always more than one way of doing the same thing. That's why I wanted to get to a certain point today, and hopefully not too long after the break, I'll say, all right, just practice, try something. All right? Messages. That you should never have to touch because that's for the Gradle build system. That's what's working in the background. The Android tool window, as it says, provides access to the debugger, terminal. If very many places in this book, I mentioned this the other day, the author shows you how to do something, and then the author says, and if you want to do it from the command window, that's what he means here with terminal. All right. Run, you already know that, to run the system. The event log to display messages related to events. There's going to be a chapter later where they ask you to literally write a program, and if you go through it, you write that program, what's going to happen is when you run it, you're going to see a bunch of this entered, this entered, this entered, because they're showing you the different events that fire when you go through a typical program cycle. All right? The Gradle console, as it says, it's got build information. Maven is the old Gradle. All right? In other words, before it was Gradle, it was Maven. You should never have to touch that. You should never have to touch Gradle here. The commander, as it says, they describe it as a combination of the project and structure window. So there's a lot of different ways you can do the same thing. All right? Memory monitoring and the designer. Now this right here, where it says do a help default key map. Do you remember the other day when I showed you this? Remember that? And I said that was a shortcut. It had a list of all the shortcuts. Does anybody want a hard copy of that? Would that help you? Yes? No? Hand up? One? I mean, I can just print out a dozen of them right now. I don't mind doing that. I don't want to do that like every week when you come in, just so you know. It's one page. I'm not going to say it's the easiest thing in the world to read, but you will now all have one, or in a couple minutes you will all have one. They also show you here, it says, another useful mechanism for navigating involves the use of the switcher. So you can use Control-Tab, and you can make your way through the files that you have open. All right? And you can go to Control-E, which has the ones you've opened most recently. So when you do a When you do a Control-Tab, you'll get this stuff. That's the switcher stuff. So it says you could switch to this if you wanted to, or this if you wanted to. If you do a Control-E, it gets the stuff you've opened last. So it's another way to navigate around the system. Again, you don't ever have to use any of these things. This is what I mentioned before. Good, I'm glad it was in this chapter. So it says if you go to configure settings or file settings, all right, they're going to show you in there the different backgrounds that you can use. And notice there's 3. IntelliJ, Windows, and Darkula. You can see in the example they use Darkula. All right? That's it for that chapter. I'm not going to go through the creating an Android visual or virtual device because that's what we did before. I figured it would be easier to do it, to have you be doing it while you saw me do it, as opposed to going through this. All right, this is what our program should look like when it runs. So if I come over here and I click Run App, and I switch over here to my emulator, I've got it. When you get the emulator and it comes up and you see this little lock here, you've got to drag that lock up to the top and let go. Why'd they set it up like that? None of us know. But that actually makes sure the emulator is ready to run your program. I'm going to leave that for a second. Hopefully when I come back, you might get this too, right, John? It's the process isn't responding. It doesn't seem to matter. You can click wait or you can click OK. I've tried doing both and didn't really seem to matter which one. Sometimes I had to click it twice. Okay? So hopefully within minutes at the most, the program's going to run on here and it's going to look just like you see here in the book. All right? They've got some different configurations and some other stuff you can set in here. You should never have to do that. If for some reason you want to create an Android virtual device from the command line, they show you how to do that. All right. It is 1:43. Let's take a break a little early. Let's come back at 2. But I'll tell you what, before we do, John, what's easier? Do you want to hand them out? Do you want them to go and grab them?
They can grab them.
All right. If you know what number you have, go over to the cabinet and grab the associated tablet. Don't grab the Mac yet, unless you want the Mac now, but we're not using the Macs for this.
I connected AVD to run on Holly's machine here.
Huh. Did you try creating one in... You did. You went back to Eclipse? Huh. Oh, that sounds like an Adrian problem to me.